Hey, in today's episode, you're going to hear Mark and I review a series we've been in for a while called The Critical Skills of Money. You're also going to hear Mark teach today's skill, which is trading. And that is trading money for other stuff, commonly known as spending. And Mark is really good on this subject. He's going to give you lots of things to think about and ways to see your spending from a different perspective. All of that's coming up.
Hi, I'm Steve. For nearly 30 years, I've been a pastor and disciple maker, and what I really love doing is helping guys be better followers of Christ and better leaders at home.
I'm Mark, a certified financial planner with an MBA and an Ivy League degree who wants to make sure you're making the smartest money decisions possible.
And this is Abraham's Wallet. Join us weekly and create a culture in your family of multi-generational prosperity, spiritually, relationally, physically, intellectually, and financially. Run your home, your dough, like a biblical boss. Okay, Mark, before you jump into this subject, I would like to review where we've been so far in our critical skills of money because we've been away from this subject for quite a while.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
So we're trying to take our people through what we think would be a really helpful diet for them. If they could get their brains around these concepts, our thought is you would be pretty healthy with money. In a way, we're giving a massive overview, a 30,000 foot view of really all kinds of stuff. Maybe the majority of what we even talk about on this podcast could be slotted in under these basic skills. So I want to just start with a quick review of where we've been so that people kind of know why we're jumping in here. The first skill that you went over with us, Mark, was the skill of acquisition, how to acquire money. And you made the point that if you don't have any money, then you can't really be a great manager of any of it. So how do you acquire money? Most people don't think of that as a skill, but the truth is people spend 12, 16 years trying to acquire skills that they can sell out in the marketplace for money. Now, we don't think that's the main point of education, but that's how education is sold to us oftentimes, is put these skills together so that you can go sell these skills out in the marketplace. The way that you acquire money really matters. We gave people some good tips there. Then you said that one of the basic skills regarding money is once it's been acquired, do you simply know where it is? It sounds simple, but there's a whole bunch of skill behind the idea of what we call oversight. And that is, do you know where your money is and do you know what it's doing? Do you know how fast you process through money? Do you know where it's going? The biblical idea is, do you know how many sheep are in your fields and do you know the quality of those sheep? Thirdly, once you get past acquisition and oversight, there's a really basic skill that's hit on multiple times in the Bible, and that is the skill of multiplication. Many, many times we've gone over the fact that God likes multiplication. I was just reading Mark chapter 4 this morning with my daughter, and there it is again, this idea that Jesus likes things that you plant once and then it produces a crop 30, 60, and 100 times what was sown. God likes that whole idea. So we are supposed to be good multipliers also. The things that come underneath our leadership, do they duplicate? Do they multiply? And do they do that healthily? The last thing that we went through, the last skill, is leverage. The thing that people are most interested in under the idea of leverage is debt and kind of dealing with your debt, but also leverage means, can you use debt? Not just be forced to take on debt, but could you choose to take on debt because you think that there's more multiplication to be made using the system of interest rates and kind of the shell game of where's your money going and can you move the interest rates around and can you move your money around in a wise way so that you're watching it, got oversight, and you're multiplying it using all of the levers that our economy allows you to have access to. Anything you want to say about that whole overview?
I think you covered it well. I think that the big admonition I have, if you're listening to this podcast for the first time ever right now and thinking, well, I guess I'm starting at whatever you're covering this week, these really do go in order. We're going to cover a new topic today. If you haven't got your hands around those other topics that you just mentioned, Steve, you probably shouldn't be worried too much about this topic we're going to cover today. So they are sequential. The one we're going to cover today is one that people love to jump to first.
Sure.
And it tends to make them very bad at some of the ones we said. There's
Right.
a reason we haven't gotten to what we're going to cover today until right now.
It is worth repeating. We put these things in this order very choicefully. We would say that this part, this kind of fun part of money management, really should come after you have mastered those previous ones. What we're talking about today is you're calling it trading.
When I think of trading, I think of two things. The first is I think of trading stocks and day trading. And
Right.
we've covered that in the past. That's not our style. We believe in owning financial assets, and stocks are part of that. But we're not going to give you the hot tips on the 5 stocks that are going to blow up by the end of 2023 today. So that's not what we're talking about here with trading. I also sort of think about this Davy Crockett type character who goes out and he collects some beaver pelts and whatever he can get his hands on. Maybe he traps a marmot and brings it to town and trades him for some sundries and some supplies to bring back to his log cabin. When I think of trading, I think of, the trading post coming to town. And that's a little bit more like what we're going to talk about today. But when we say trading, what we really mean, trading financial capital for other things. Now, those might be other things that have financial value, but I'll quit beating around the bush and say, what we're talking about today, Steve, is spending. How to deploy money in wise ways. And once you've gotten money, learned how to grow it, learned how to keep an eye on it where you know where it's going, now we're going to say, are you good at spending money? The Bible has some things to say about spending money.
Yeah, I thought so, but it's not something that we talk about too much. And I think, as you said, people are very interested because it's kind of the fun part. It's kind of like why you earn money so that you can eventually at some point pull the trigger. It's what my dad was really good at, pulling the trigger and actually buying stuff. So yeah.
Isaiah 55:2 says, why do you spend money for that which is not bread and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen diligently to me and eat what is good and delight yourselves in rich food. Obviously, this has spiritual implications. It's saying, don't go out and spend all your hard work on stuff that doesn't satisfy. But it's also, like so many things that we cover on the Abraham's Wallet podcast, there's real implications that anytime we are spending, whether that's financial capital or other capital, we need to be thinking, is what we're getting back quality? Is it fulfilling? Does it actually meet the need that we think it is? Spoiler alert, the culture right now is bombarding all of us all day long with messages that say, spend your money, this will satisfy. And I'd say for the most part, it's lies. Most of the things that they're saying that about, not satisfactory, not what we would call rich food. That's a principle that I pull out of the scriptures. I went through Ecclesiastes recently, and I would say I was surprised at this refrain that the writer keeps saying, one of the good things in life is that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in all of their toil. This is the gift of God. He kind of constantly comes back to this idea that one of the blessings of life is that you would enjoy your spouse and enjoy your food. And that doesn't sound like a life of total austerity to me.
Right.
A lot of financial blogs and podcasts out there, they're really keen on this. How can we encourage you to spend nothing so that you can retire from your horrible job and sit in front of, I don't know, maybe you watch Netflix all day. I don't know. That's not what we're about. We actually think there are good things that are eternal and there are good things that are temporal. The Lord actually gives us the opportunity to take some of the financial capital that we are entrusted with, and some of it gets invested for 500-year timelines for many generations. And some of it gets invested for us to spend on ourselves to enjoy as a treat. And that's something that, frankly, was kind of a shocker to me when I first started learning about it, that God it's not just that he kind of looks the other way and goes, I know this is part of working with people that I made, is that they're going to spend some money on stuff and I'm going to be really upset. That's not how it works. He actually intends for us to enjoy his his goodness and his kingdom and his reign through some of the good things in the world. And we need to be really good spenders, I would argue, maybe more than any previous generation, because there's so many opportunities to be terrible at spending and to take a bunch of money that could have all these great uses and use it for something that we think even maybe we had the best of intentions, but we go, this was a giant mistake. It wasn't fulfilling at all.
This is such an important point. It's so core to what we do here, is ringing the bell of saying, hold on a second. If you were raised in a religious environment and you were taught that the best Christian is someone who has nothing and has given it all away and who lives on the bare minimum, you're really not living a biblical life. That's not what the scriptures teach us. They teach us to be generous, yes, but also to take care of your family first and to build something that lasts for generations. And I can't help but observe about these scriptures that you just read. It says, don't spend your money on that which doesn't satisfy. The clear insinuation is, spend your money on what does satisfy. And it says good food, like the good food that actually satisfies you. So I would say one of the main takeaways of that passage is like, don't buy junk food.
Don't buy junk.
There you go. Now that's a clear biblical principle, is don't buy junk. We do buy things that the second that they're being bought, this is producing anxiety. It will produce clutter. You buy food and you could turn to somebody and say, this isn't good for me and I won't feel good when I eat this. Pop-Tarts should probably not be a main staple of your grocery budget. I have to just reiterate what you said, which is the assumption biblically, maybe not in religious circles and churches, but biblically, it's that you're spending your money on good stuff and that the stuff that you buy ends up making you happy. I think we got to come back to that heart of God for his children, which isn't to be a scrimping miser and take away from us and make us think smaller and smaller. He actually wants us to think bigger and longer term in the kingdom, so that you don't just buy, for instance, food is such an easy example. You don't just buy food that's going to make you happy in the next 5 minutes. You buy food that's going to serve your body for the next 10 years, right?
That's good. So I want to get real specific now with this principle and take it down to the boots on the ground. You're out there sort of making spending decisions. How does this apply? And I think one of the places where this applies is, I'm going to give you some check boxes to say, have I got the skill of trading down? And one of those would be, can you really say, I am pretty good at knowing when and where I should spend more for quality versus when I should buy the cheaper option? We just said a bunch of stuff about don't buy junk, but there are times, absolutely, when you should not go out and buy the most expensive option or even the highest quality option. You and I don't necessarily need the industrial strength everything. There's times when you go, I'm just going to use this once. First, I think price is not always equal to quality.
That's true.
I'm thinking about a few examples came to mind. If you've listened to this podcast, you may know I was sommelier for a while, and I passed a bunch of certifications. And wine is a world where people tend to think, if they don't know a whole lot about wine, the more expensive a bottle of wine, the higher quality, and it'll be better. It'll be better. If I want to impress somebody who knows about wine, I just go buy something that's in a price point that maybe is way above what I normally spend. That's not necessarily true. And I think there's a lot of categories like this where we equate price with quality. I am a big fan of the Old Navy jeans, which are $20, and they have outlasted by a lot the designer jeans that my wife made me buy because she thought, okay, it's time for you to grow up and buy some jeans that aren't from a discount store. The designer jeans were $200. The Old Navy jeans were $20. The Old Navy jeans are still with me. The designer jeans failed very quickly. That's one piece. The other is just asking, when do I need something that's potentially going to last for a very long time, and when do I not? Even if, let's say that the jeans wore out after 20 uses, but you only wear jeans once a month. Well, you might be totally fine with those jeans. Those are two sides of that quality and price coin where you should say, when you're thinking about a purchase decision, especially something that you might have for a while, not like a consumable. We'll get to consumables in a second. What kind of quality do I need for how I'm going to use this thing? And is price even an indicator of that quality? Or is there some other way for me to judge, that? So how do you think about this, Steve, when you're going out and looking for a product? How do you assess quality and price?
Well, I've never been as thoughtful about it as you're being here. So I'm actually very interested in what you're going to say, because I think I've probably just picked up a value system that says, oh, this is going to last a while, so I need it to be nicer. This is something that's going to be short term, so it's whatever I can put up with. So I don't know.
I would say on that question of quality, there's places where we're all experts. The wine thing is a good example again. I feel really comfortable going out and choosing something that's going to be great, but most people probably aren't in that category. If they're asked to bring a bottle of wine to dinner, they're going to need a resource that can tell them if they're not an expert in that. You recently had an experience where you were shopping for a vehicle, and that's certainly a big decision where the quality and price equation matters a lot, because the price tag is very high and the price of failing on that quality decision is very high. You asked our resident expert Ian about what kinds of cars you should buy, and I remember you said like a Ford Explorer. That sounds like a great idea. It's from a reputable brand, and he's chortled and said that's a assessment from someone who does not understand the ins and outs of quality in the car industry, because that one is going to be a bad choice for you if it's something that you hope to last a long time. And so I personally look for a few reliable places where I can get that type of info for stuff I don't know about. One of my favorites is called Wirecutter. It used to be an independent blog, and they reviewed everything. So I recently bought a vacuum cleaner. I'm not a vacuum cleaner expert, and I thought maybe I should just go buy the Dyson. It's like $500, and it seems like everybody thinks this is the best one.
The best, yeah.
Well, I went to the Wirecutter, which has now been bought by the New York Times. So if you're boycotting the New York Times, then go somewhere else. But they said, hey, this other vacuum from a company called Shark, just as good, and $150. And I bought two of them now. I've bought one for our vacation property and one for our home, and they work great. I really like having those types of resources. Sometimes they're online like Wirecutter. Sometimes they're people, where I go, I know somebody who really knows about fill in the blank. I used somebody this week to say, hey, I'm having some issues with my lawn. And there's so many products out there trying to tell me, give us some money and we will solve your problem. And I'm not equipped to know which one is good and the right one. So I called somebody who knows a lot about that stuff. And he's like, oh, this is exactly what you need. Spend $17 instead of the $100 you would have spent if you'd gone to Home Depot by yourself and just bought some stuff. Collecting people and resources where you can go to assess quality, pretty good idea.
Yes, that's great. I love it. This is great so far. Keep going.
Number 2 on this one is know what you're shopping for. I'm going to go back to cars again. I think I've talked about this before, but we have a friend who sells Land Rovers, the super fancy, ridiculously expensive SUVs. And he has told me very openly, if you're somebody who's looking for reliability, this is the worst vehicle you could buy. But if you're somebody who's looking for luxury, if I can get you to sit in it, you don't have to turn it on. If I can get you to sit in it and you can somehow come up with the cash for it, the deal is done. You will buy it because there is nothing better than this car from a luxury standpoint. I'm sure that's debatable, but you get the point, which is if you are shopping for luxury when you're going out to buy a car, you should buy a different car than if you're shopping for something that can run to 500,000 miles and be a bomb-proof engine. And we're going to get to it in a second, but it's not wrong to shop for luxury on occasion. It's not wrong to prioritize something other than the minimum viable product that will meet my basic need in this category, whether that's food that will keep me alive or a vehicle that will move me from point A to point B. You just need to have your eyes open and make that decision with a clean conscience. You should know what you're shopping for so that you can say, where should I go? What should I look at? On food, because food just tends to be one of those categories that's the biggest one that people struggle with when we talk to them about their budgets and their spending. Can I go on a little rant here?
Yeah, sure. Rant.
You don't have to buy organic, grass-fed, all-natural, etc. food in order to feed your family in a super healthy fashion. That's my hot sports take.
Oh, I like
And
this rant. Please go on.
I'm going to say two things that might sound conflicting to you. I don't think they're conflicting. One is that feeding your family healthy food is very important. Like you
Okay.
said at the start, we could survive for a while, probably for a long while, on McDonald's every night, and it would be very cheap. We would pay for that decision in other ways. Healthcare bills, gastrointestinal consequences. And yet, I do talk to people who say, we just go to Whole Foods because it's a value for us to have healthy food. And I think you're getting, if that's your take, that everything we buy is going to come from the super duper premium. I don't know if it's actually Whole Foods now, but super premium, whatever. I think you might be needing to reconsider whether you're potentially falling victim to some of these marketers who exist at every tier of the spending spectrum. There's people who want to convince you that if you really love your family and you want to be healthy, you'll buy this, whatever. And, I'll tell you that I see families who aren't particularly healthy, but they eat a lot of organic broccoli. And I see families who are making do with a much lower grocery budget that buy their frozen vegetables at Walmart, and they're killing it from a health standpoint. So not trying to renege on our previous statement that if food is a value for your home, it's okay to put extra money there. And when we talked through budgets, we talked through that. I'm not here to say you have to keep your grocery budget as low as possible.
Right.
But I also think if you think, well, we're just going to spend without giving ourselves any checks on this category because it's important and we want health, well, you might be getting hoodwinked.
That's a great watch out. That's very fair.
Last thing I wanted to say on this one is, and this will kind of transition us into the next topic, but we wrote an article called On Luxury, where we were asking the question back in the early days of the Abraham's Wallet blog, when it was just a blog, is it okay for Christians to indulge in luxury? One of the things I said, we'll put a link to that episode in the notes, but one of the things I said in that article, there's a study done by these two guys, Jing Zhu and Norbert Schwartz. Jing and Norbert studied the differences in satisfaction amongst Honda, BMW, and Ford owners. And they even went so far as to run an experiment where they gave people who drove average economy cars, some of them got a replacement car that was an average economy car, and others got a super fancy BMW. Did all sorts of follow-up with these people for weeks and months, and they were trying to answer two questions. And the first one was, will a luxury car make you happy? And what do you think the answer to their question was, Steve?
Going on nothing more than words from a book that was written by the Spirit of the one who made us all and designed us, I'm going to guess the answer is no. A luxury car won't make you happy.
Well, I'll say it's a little bit of a trick question. The answer is yes. A luxury car will make you happy. But the big caveat here, and the second question, is will a luxury car make you happy for very long?
Right.
And
it's be a short term.
Right. So the average time, they even hooked these people up to brain scans and looked at what's going on in their biochemistry when they sit down into a fancy car. And it took, I think, something like 4 weeks for them to have the exact same fireworks in their brain when they sat in the new luxury car that they had previously had when they sat down in their old junker. And so
4 big weeks.
Yeah, it's like when I read this, I thought, I'm good on the luxury car front. I'm going to, if I ever get that itch, I'm going to go rent something super cool from Turo for a day.
Okay, that's right.
Drive it around, feel cool, and then return it to the owner and have saved myself, $100 and something thousand.
Yeah, I always think about, we've done a big road trip, so I've been on the highways a lot. And I always think of whatever it is that's automotively making you salivate. If it's a Tesla, there's one of those driving by and you think, oh, if I could just get in one of those. Do yourself a favor and just look in the windows of everybody riding in and driving those cars. Do they look delighted to you, or do they look like they're having to go to the DMV? That they usually look as miserable as anybody else. You think, maybe I'm believing a little bit of a lie if I think that that's really going to perk up my life in any significant way long term. Just look at the people driving the things that you fantasize about. It's always nice to look over over the fence and just go, is it really? Is it really that way? Maybe let's pop that fantasy a little bit.
Going back to one of our previous critical skills of money, oversight, which we said that's partly with your finances and budgeting and things like that, but it's also just taking care of your things. I would bet, and I've learned this from you, you're very good at this, and our friend Blake over at Drop Detailing.
Oh, yeah.
I have learned that spending money keeping my vehicle super clean and nice, so regularly treating it the way it needs to be treated, where every time I get in, I'm like, wow, this is a relaxing, clean, nice environment. I would take a clean and well-maintained Honda Accord from 10 years ago over most. I mean, this is not to shame if you're a mom and you're listening to this and you're looking in the back of your Suburban, you have a $100,000 SUV, but you look and it's got 6 inches of trash in the floor. I know how that feels. Like I've had that experience with when I had little kids. I'll take a well-maintained, well-taken care of thing that's way less, quote, fancy. That provides me ongoing joy and even some satisfaction that I took care of it.
Right.
More than going out and trying to buy my way into that feeling, which I'll probably feel like we said, for about 4 weeks.
That's a great observation.
Okay. Piece number 2 is, I would say, if you're good at this skill of trading, you're good at assessing prices. So that might sound obvious. I look at the price, I know the price, but going back to our grocery example, it's very hard to know if you would be better off buying your meats at Costco or at the local grocery store or some subscription service. So it's hard to kind of regularly revisit that. And I've been at a table with people who were arguing about the grocery thing, and one person was dead set, Costco is the cheapest option. And another person was dead set, Trader Joe's is where I save all the money. And somebody else said, no, it's Instacart where they deliver it to me and it's cheaper. The truth is, you might save more money on any one of those depending on a whole lot of factors that aren't just the price tag.
Yeah.
So we're a Costco family. Are you guys a Costco family? I don't know if I've ever asked you.
No, it's across town. We don't do it.
Some people will spend way, way more money if they get a Costco membership because they walk in and they say, there's all these people offering samples. There's so many interesting prepared foods. And every time I have a different smorgasbord of delights that I come out with. If that's you, I don't recommend Costco because it's an environment designed to kind of, again, bombard you with opportunities to spend and trade your money for things you weren't really planning on when you walked in the door.
Would you say it titillates you?
Yeah. The only thing I get titillated by is the occasional golf short at Costco. I'm like,
the golf short.
They got me with 3 different pairs of nice, slightly stretchy, really comfortable.
Good.
But for us, the reason it's cheaper is because we stick to a very specific list. We buy pretty much the same things there every time we go. We only buy the things in bulk that we eat in bulk. So we don't throw away stuff, which is another huge pitfall of these bulk stores. Some people who just go, I don't care what store I walk into, I'm going to be snagging things off the shelves that I didn't intend to buy. They actually will save money by paying for one of these services that will deliver groceries to them so that they can go, there's no temptation. I go down the list. It's got a calculator there. As I add things to my cart, I can see the total, and I'm not going to get to a register and be surprised and too embarrassed to go put back half the things I bought. So delivery option, even though I'm paying a premium for the delivery service, saves me money.
Does Instacart do that? Are they giving you a subtotal as you're adding things to your cart?
I believe so. I've done Instacart one time in my life, although I will say yesterday I was working and I hear a commotion downstairs and I realized I've received groceries. Fortunately, the delivery man was still close enough that I could flag him down and say, you've delivered these to the wrong house. But I did think for a moment, is this just the Lord's blessing?
Some people might have put it underneath that heading and ushered the groceries right into the house. We've had Kroger deliver to us a few times, and it's darn it, we can't trust those shoppers when it comes to produce. They don't care. They just throw whatever's handy in there, and you're getting brown, mealy apples. You're getting unripe avocados. You just got to do that yourself. You got to choose and select carefully inspected produce. What can I say?
Yeah, I personally love a good trip to the grocery store. I know some
I do
people
too. I think
they
it's
view
really
that.
fun.
Some people hate that. That's fine. I don't mind a relaxing stroll through the produce section.
Same.
Another tip I would just give, I went to the store a couple months ago. We were really close to our monthly budget for groceries, and my wife had kind of said, well, we're going to bust it this month. And I said, give me one chance to get in there and I will prove that we can do it. And
Yeah.
I had a calculator in my hand as I shopped, and I went through as I added. And this is going back to kind of that, if you're shopping online, it's nice that this happens automatically, but it really, really helped, where I said, okay, I've got this many dollars left, and I know which items are maybe a maybe and which ones we have to have or we will starve this week. And I ended up able to kind of close out the month under budget. So that's just a little trick for assessing prices. And you might even say, going back to that quality versus there's places where we can punt. On that particular grocery visit, there was things I said, this is the brand my wife will prefer, and she will feel not pleased if I come home with an alternative. But on this other category, it's fine. We can go with something cheaper.
Sure.
And making those decisions, getting good at that as a family, I think is a valuable part of the skill.
I got to throw this in. What you were doing there is you low-doed your shopping visit. We have this rhythm around here that every February we do a low-dough, what would you call it? A training camp that happens every February where we just practice tightening our belts and spending less just so we can do it. Most people don't have any area of their life where they do that unless they literally don't have enough dollars to get to the end of the month. But we have this practice as a family. Let's make a decision. We're going to spend less this month.
I know that we're kind of trying to cram a lot into this one, so I'm going to move on to a really important question when it comes to trading, to spending, and that's how much of this money that I've got am I allowed to or supposed to use to treat myself with? This would be that luxury category. And of course, if we're honest, most of our lives are luxury. You own more than one pair of shoes. That puts you in rare air globally in
Fact.
terms of excess and luxury. So I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but do you know what Proverbs 21:20 says? Precious treasure and oil are in a wise man's dwelling, but a foolish man devours it. And I really like this proverb because the gist here is that the treasure is in the wise man's house. It's also temporarily in the foolish man's house. The difference is not, does the wise man avoid precious treasure and oil? No, he doesn't devour it though. And so I've had this kind of personally come and knock on my door, where I think I was podcasting about this at the time. There was a time when I was really interested in luxury watches, and I kind of used like buying and selling of these things and finding good deals to take a little bit of money and grow a pretty pricey collection of watches from a very small seed of money. So I had precious treasure in my house. Those are things that people thought were valuable. Then I noticed that there was this pride thing popping up, and I would put one of these on and I would think, this is cool. People see this and they think I have money. I like the way I feel. And I felt instructed to, for the most part, get rid of that treasure because I was devouring it in a way, meaning I was using it for purposes that had nothing to do with God's kingdom or his purposes for me. So I said, okay, we're going to be done with this particular collection. It's not that having a luxury watch is a wrong thing. I am not saying that. I'm saying that when we have treasure and luxury and things like that, if the purpose is to bathe ourselves or to amp up our pride or to glorify ourselves, then we're in dangerous ground there, and we should have the little sirens going off that this might be devouring of wealth instead of stewarding it.
That's such a great point. And I have found myself recently over and over recommending that people pay attention to their own hearts and their own consciences about all sorts of things, because that's how God wants to speak to us. And sometimes we'll feel in our gut, which is, I shouldn't buy another coat. I already have coats, but I really like this coat. And we feel it. You feel it in your gut, and you walk through a mental gymnastics, a thought pattern. I have the money to do this. I can buy this. And then you justify it, and then you buy it. And what you did was you ignored the fact that in your gut, you had this feeling of, this isn't right for me. And so good on you to go, there's something about these luxury watches that's getting into my gut. It's getting into the viscera of my spirit, and I can't let that happen. So that's one of the major watch outs when it comes to luxury is, do you find your own spirit being more callous, a lack of sensitivity? If there is, then that's one of the values of Lodo Feb. You need to turn that switch off for a while so that you can regrow some sensitivity. This is just something that we do in my house. We'll have these months where we call it clean eating, no sugar, and we're going way down on things like dairy, which we love. Why is that? Because it's good to take away your own pleasure in life? No, it's because we know that we can grow insensitive to like always having a green light all the time. We've got the money. We don't feel obese this week. Let's go, go, go. As opposed to, hold on, we're supposed to be sensitive about all of these things, and we can just grow so callous to them. So I think that's a great reference. It's hard to do in real life.
There's a branch of the personal finance community. I would say they preach salvation through extreme frugality. You and I both, we were really into like Mr. Money Mustache back in the day. That piece, it was like, wow, this is kind of appealing. He's encouraging people to do something hard. But I'll say at the core, that hope, just like the American consumer buy, that hope of you'll feel better if you just spend nothing, is just as bankrupt as our spending happy American worldview is. The last thing I want to say on this point is your community that you're in has a huge impact on how you will think about spending. So if you spend time with a bunch of people who think a $350,000 home renovation is a normal middle-class American thing to do, then you'll also start to think in this way, which is not a smart way to think. Again, that's not saying that you can't do a $350,000 home renovation. It is saying, though, that I see over and over people who get involved in community with people who might actually be stewarding their resources well, but they have 4 times the resources. And then it makes everybody that's not in that position, that's a part of that crew, start going, I need to just maybe we bite our tongue and we go out and spend $300 on dinner tonight with the crew, because that's what people are doing. And this is a hard one to navigate. Like, it takes some effort to say, we're not going to be doing that. Our kid is not going to join the soccer league with your kids that costs $2,000 a year. I'm sorry, but we can't afford it with the financial resources we're stewarding. So that takes some humility. I'll tell you that example was a real one that I've heard from a family that was in our community. And afterwards I thought, you guys know what you're doing when it comes to money, and big high five, because I don't hear that type of thing very often. And when I do, I want to celebrate it. But it does take some humility to go, we want to be friends with people all over the financial spectrum. There's actually really good reasons to be friends with people that have a lot more money than you, but you got to be on your guard on this one. The keeping up with the Joneses thing, it's real, and it can eat your wealth quickly.
That's such a great point. And we've noticed that the people that we run with, and it's just the people that you spend your time around. The Bible says that you're going to be affected by the people that you spend time around. And that can be a good thing when it comes to how can you make money in a savvy way. It can be a bad thing when people are spending their money according to their resources, which, as you say, are out of line with yours. My wife's business is a great example. She spends a ton of time with people when she does these super fancy weddings with billionaires who are jet setting around the world for weddings. And then it can just be sort of like, yeah, why don't we charter private flights when we go on vacation? Because it's super convenient. Yeah, it is super convenient. But we don't live in that stratosphere. You got to kind of deal with all of these thoughts. So it's a good thing. I'll just say this as a button on this topic. It's a good thing to do a little analyzing of who are the people that I spend time around. If you had to guess, what's their financial situation, and what can you either learn from them where they are, or what should you not take from them as a reference? The cars that they drive, for instance, that might not be a good reference for you for cars that you drive, just because they're in a different situation.
Yeah. And it's okay to take and leave things kind of a la carte. So
Sure.
I have people that I'm like, that person has the gift of earning, but they have not figured out this spending thing yet. So yeah. I'm going to try to glean everything I can on how they are great at creating wealth and creating income. I won't be learning from them when it comes to how they run their budget in their household. Kind of the last thing I wanted to hit on this topic, and I think it's a big deal for most of the people who listen to this, but what do you do in this area of spending when you disagree with your spouse on a spending decision? This could, and I bet it will be, a whole episode someday in the future, how to deal with this. I don't know, Stephen, have you ever disagreed with your spouse on a spending decision?
Nope. And that's been really fortunate.
Okay, so that's all we have to say about that one. But broken record here. We're going to say the thing we often say when it comes to money stuff, which is you have to start with vision. Usually, if there's a big disagreement in a spending decision, it's not really about that individual decision.
Yep.
There was a spending decision in my household today that I did not like that was made by my wife. My initial reaction was like, I don't like it that we spent money on that. But when I stepped back, I went, wait a second. We are agreed on what we're trying to build, what was important to our household. And this actually is kind of in line with that. So I might have made a slightly different choice, but I'm cool with it. And it didn't turn into a fight or an argument about that because we relied on that. Before you can really align on spending, you need to say, who are we? Why would we be saving? And why would we be spending? What are the types of things that we uniquely as a family are called to do in this world? Once you get that down, it makes it way less likely that you're going to have a blow up fight over you bought a new pair of sneakers and the wife didn't like it, or she bought a new piece of furniture and you didn't like it. You can really go, well, does this fit? Do we have the money? Does it match the budget that we created that's a funding plan for the vision that we're pursuing? Yep. And if those things are in line, then the little kind of I wouldn't have spent on that stuff becomes a much more of you go, okay, that's preference. But you don't have those big ideological headbutting matches that you do when there's no vision and it kind of feels like I want to do this and you want to do that. And those aren't lined up. So how would we ever agree on the stuff we're spending on?
That's right. Honey, that's $15,000 we've spent this year on trying to make this living room nice. But we said that the point of this year was about education savings, or we're trying to do retirement. So what's happening here? It's a vision question. It's not the mundane purchases. It's like, where are we going? Are we even heading the same direction? We're never going to stop. You might notice that when we reach an impasse on so many of these subjects, we go back to vision because it instructs us on how we're saving, how we're investing, how we're spending, because it's like, what is our family for? So we're just constantly going to come back to that. And I know that we have some families that listen to Abe's Wallet and eventually they go, okay, put me through the process on coming up with a family vision. You guys won't shut up about it. And so we're always happy for people to engage in that. It just touches everything. There's no way to get around it.
That's right. We can put a link in the notes to a course that we created that can actually walk you through the first part of creating a vision where you would be aligned on some of those things. A couple other just smaller tips. I think having some funny money was what I call it in the budget, which is just a his and hers monthly allocation that it's not going to be scrutinized by the other. I don't think that solves like the big ideological questions, but it can be helpful on the margins so that you're not feeling like I'm going to have to justify this latte I would like to buy. So I think whether that's $20 a month or $200 a month is something to figure out based on the resources you've got. I don't think it should be a top 5 budget item though. I don't think it should be like we spend $2,000 a month on our mortgage and we spend $2,000 a month on our funny money. That seems like it's probably a little bit out of line, but that's a tip to just kind of eliminate some of the smaller stuff that hopefully you're not picking at each other about anyways. I would also say seeking outside counsel when you're at an impasse is valuable. So we've talked about having other families or other individuals that can look into your money scene and help you. Please don't show up at that person's house in the middle of a big knockdown fight about a specific purchase. I think that's much more helpful when you're saying, here's an overview of what we're thinking about doing with our money. What do you think? Does this look good to you? At the same time, I would say that husbands, you have a responsibility to lead your family. And that includes when it comes to money decisions.
Yes.
You have to tread this balance of being comfortable leading. I think it's very easy to go, well, if I just say fine to the wife on any decisions that come to disagreement with money, it will keep the peace in the home. If you're doing that, you're sinning as a husband. You need to be comfortable saying, if there's a total disagreement and there just has to be a decision made, I think you need to be comfortable saying, this is the direction I feel like we're going. So this is the direction we're going. At the same time, I say, if that happens all the time, there's something way downstream that's going wrong. So don't end at the, I'm the tiebreaker vote and therefore I will make the decision.
Right.
If you find yourself there more than very rarely, seek help, back up, and get on the same page together.
Just to touch again on the funny money subject, I think it's a good principle that it should be a line item somewhere to have some freedom. You can either say, okay, this is your personal deal. It could be small, by the way.
Hey, it's Steven here, interrupting, I assume, myself or Mark talking. Just interrupting to give you a little thought from left field. Why not? So I'm going to change the subject real quick and give you a little thought. The thought is on slothfulness. I think we all need reminders from time to time about being slothful because we live in a culture that praises leisure. And I'm going to read you a little section from Biblical Economics by R.C. Sproul. It's a recommendable book. Biblical Economics by R.C. Sproul. The Bible clearly speaks out against those who are poor because they are lazy. Laziness is a real and serious human problem. Slothfulness involves a refusal to fulfill God's creation mandate to work, and God comes down hard on it. Proverbs 6:6, a verse that we love around Abraham's wallet, says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider her ways and be wise." Sproul says it's a pitiful and sinful man who must look to insects for instruction. God commands hard work from his people. It's a command to both the wealthy and the poor that they dare not overlook. Paul speaks about the slothful poor when he writes, "If anyone will not work, neither shall he eat," in 2 Thessalonians 3:10. So it doesn't matter what your financial situation is today. I encourage all of you dudes on your road to Abrahamic prosperity that you work hard today. If you're listening to this on the way to work or on your lunch break, I just want to encourage you, don't waste your time and to be diligent and to be a hard worker. All right, that's my thought from left field. Now I'm going to kick you back to what we were talking about.
We've only got room for $50 a month for you to do that for what we're doing right now with our money. That's fine. But that feeling of freedom sure beats saying you must never buy a latte. That's a hard line to draw and does not produce the sort of freedom and happiness that we've been reading about in these proverbs. The other thing that can be done, just as an idea, is that in my parents' household, my mother ran the books. She was also the saver, and my father was the spender. So she said, okay, we know that you're going to have like hobby expenses, golf, and you're going to buy ammo. We also know that you're going to do lunches with your buddies in a month. So what she did was she created a category that included all that stuff with a little wiggle room, and that became my dad's allowance. So she would give him an allowance, and he knew out of that had to come hobbies. And if he wanted to go do something ridiculous at the dollar store or wherever he, or Cabela's or wherever he went, it was going to come out of that allowance. That's one way to handle it. If you just want, we want to give ourselves and our spouses some kind of financial freedom, unless you are in dire straits, in which case we would refer you to the Dave Ramsey program. But that's not where we're trying to head with our people.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, last thing I wanted to chip in on this spousal question that I've seen as I work with families through kind of setting up budgets and working through spending differences and things like that. I think it's very helpful to go back and think about your family of origin when it comes to kind of the money culture. Personally, my wife and I came from very different money cultures, similar levels of income actually, but very different cultures around money. And it's helped us understand why we have certain first reactions to money stuff that might be different than each other. other opposite. With that in mind, when I go, oh, I know where you're coming from now, and you know where I'm coming from, so we can actually move forward a little bit without offense and more with understanding. So I think poking around in, well, what was money like in your home? And you go, you hear for the first time maybe, well, every time we got money, we spent it. And we were just full of generosity and all that. And you go, okay, there was like this generosity thing and this celebration thing going. And in the other person's household, maybe it was the opposite. It was like, wow, my family was just great at savings, but they were so stingy. And we want to take some of these skills and use them for our family. And we want to take some of these skills and use them for our family. And when it pops up that there's maybe an initial first reaction difference, we know where that's coming from and go, oh, maybe there's some of that like throw caution to the wind thing happening right now, and we should be a little more careful with savings. Or no, maybe there's some stinginess happening right now. And
Right.
that can be really, I think, a helpful way to start to understand each other when you might have conflict around spending decisions.
Yeah, I think that's super helpful, especially with either a newly married couple or you're going to be married. That's a great thing to do, is let's just compare notes on where we came from. What were the arguments in your family of origin around money? Where were the stresses? What were the anxieties that you've had around money, whether it was as a student or a college student or out of college, or just to talk through those things and go, what's our money worldview? And knowing that those things, they can either be complementary or they're going to clash dramatically. So talking through those is great for keeping peace in your home and, again, staying on vision together.
So that's what I got when it comes to spending, Steve. What do you think? Maybe test these skills out, go to the dollar store where you can't do too much damage.
I think these are really helpful ways of looking at these things and great fodder for conversation between husbands and wives, that's for sure. And I think it puts people in good stead regarding looking at their whole month, whether it's investment money or savings money or spending money, just the relationship with all these moving pieces together, and knowing this spending thing is going to be a major part of our lives for as long as we're here. So we should talk about them and get our heads around them, because it's part of our discipleship, isn't it? Knowing how to do these things and being wise to handle truth, if you will, the truth of the actual numbers on your budget, and the grace that comes with going, okay, we make mistakes sometimes, or we spin out in our flesh sometimes, we make impulsive purchases, and learning how to live with each other. It's a really important topic. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to transition into, let's talk about us a little bit. What do you say?
Great. Let's do it.
Okay. I think that whoever's left standing right now and is still listening might be interested in this trip that as much ballyhooed trip that we both took to Texas while our girls went to camp, and we went trotting around DFW, meeting with clients. I also took a swing down Houston way. But what do you think people would like to hear about that week? Favorite moments of yours?
Oh man, I think that my favorite moments all either centered around delicious foods or just good conversation with the people that we're connected to, either through Abraham's Wallet or clients that we get to serve through Outpost.
Okay, give us a listing of the barbecue that you have enjoyed. I made a short list while you compile yours. I'll start with maybe my surprise delight of the whole trip was a meal that we had with a good man named Tim Wu.
So you said barbecue. You're talking food, not barbecue.
Well, hold on a second. Where we ate with Tim was up in McKinney, I believe, or maybe I think it was in Frisco. We went to a place that it doesn't make my eyes pop out of my head because it's not a new novelty to me. It's an old standard, and this place is La Hacienda Ranch. There's a few of them around DFW. And Tim said, well, let's go there and get the fajitas. Now, a fajita is the closest thing that the Mexican restaurant will offer you that could even be pushed into a barbecue-y kind of category. I just want to say that I was reintroduced to the wonder of the beef fajita at La Hacienda Ranch. And I tell you now that there might be different fajitas on this planet, but there's not a better beef fajita than that. It was so delicious that I I just kept pushing myself away from the table going, there's no way to improve this. It's outrageously good.
There's
Now,
flank steaks marinating downstairs right now in my home because of those fajitas. Because
they inspired you.
I'm still thinking about how good they were. And, that unquestionably was the best piece of morsel, that best tidbit of nutrition that I put into my body in that week was those fajitas. It was so good. This is a long history for Tim. Every time he has had a meal with us, he has introduced us to something that I don't exaggerate when I say it changed my life. He introduced me to the beef rib. I didn't even know about the beef rib before that. And now that's my favorite thing to smoke. Evidently, he has rekindled both of our love for the beef fajita. There's going to be a Shabbat that's centered around Christ, but the beef fajita is going to play a strong second in that meal tonight.
I got a couple other shout outs down in Houston. Shout out to Longhorn Sausage and Barbecue. I've never heard of a place titled that way, but that's how they do it. Longhorn Sausage and Barbecue in Houston, highly rated on Yelp with good reason. And then there was a place, if you're down in Houston area, I'd like to recommend a place called Wild Oats that's right at the farmer's market. And there's this young chef who thought, I want a restaurant that gives the best of Texas cuisine and does it in a newfangled or interesting or creative way. And I'll just tell you about two of these dishes that we enjoyed at Wild Oats. One was what they called an armadillo egg. And what the armadillo egg is a cream cheese filled jalapeno, which is surrounded with sausage, which is wrapped in bacon, and the whole thing is flame grilled and served in like a bed of ranch dressing, some kind of fancy ranch dressing. Wow. I would just like to say wow about that dish. And then you talk about rekindling the love for an old standard like beef fajitas. This dude, whose name I don't know, I can't remember his name, the chef, has produced, I think, the finest chicken fried steak I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
He has elevated, usually you take a piece of meat that's like shoe leather and then you deep fry it to sort of try to tenderize it. And then you shroud it in cream gravy so that nobody knows what they're eating. This was the finest piece of meat that had been tenderized and put into a chicken fried steak I've ever had. So I want to recommend that to anybody that's in the area. Find your way to. I will definitely be taking friends back to Wild Oats in the future. Okay, now back over to you. I want you to give us some barbecue listings of yours.
Okay, just in case anybody's not in the DFW area, I'll throw one out that has become our tradition on the way down, is we always stop in Durango, Colorado, and there's these Texans that have opened a place called Serious Texas Barbecue. And they might be terrible at naming restaurants, but they're quite good at cooking barbecue. So that has become a standard for us. It's reliable. I can now say after 3 visits, it's always been really good. And it's this beautiful setting right on the Animas River in Durango. You overlook the river, you eat barbecue. And then after you finish dinner, you can pay a couple bucks and there's 18 holes of putt-putt that you can play. So
lovely.
The perfect ending to a long day in the car for us. That's always been stop number 1 on our drive to Texas. I'm going to have to say though, for my number 2 with Tim, when we were having these beef fajitas, he was just pumping us up about, if we had time, there's one other place that you'd really need to try. It turned out I was staying at my dad's house that night, and this place was in walking distance of my dad's house. It was called Mike's Chicken. I think it was the best piece of fried chicken I've ever had. So I don't know if we need to hire Mr. Wu as a consultant to the Abraham's Wallet podcast, because he's changing lives out there with the work he's doing around food recommendation. But that piece of fried chicken, it was so good that it will now be a always must go when I'm in Dallas, as long as they're still doing what they're doing now.
Excellent. Which brings me to my last place I'd like to mention. Well, I could mention a couple places that I just want to say this. We came through St. Louis on our drive down, and it was an option to stop for St. Louis barbecue. And I said, no, thank you. And I just kept going. So I just want to throw that in. I wasn't interested in that. I'm interested in Texas barbecue. And we ate at a place called 1050 Barbecue. Was it enjoyable when we ate it?
Yeah, it was great. The ribs were outstanding.
Yes, you were singing the praises of the ribs. It was great. They had a torpedo, which is another kind of, is not unlike the armadillo egg. I'll just tell the people that the next day we learned
In the wee hours of the morning of the next day.
we learned that both of us had GI troubles the night before, and I'm not referring to World War II Army men. And do you know that old saying when something goes wrong and you say, I crapped the bed? You know that one?
Yeah.
Well, something like that happened in your dad's house. It was a rough night because we both suffered that night. I can only attribute it to 1050 barbecue. I don't know what else to say.
I'm gonna blame the torpedoes specifically because I ate one. You had 3 or 4.
This is one of these places where you're like in front of the smoke pit and you point at the piece of meat, that, and then you kind of go through the line and you go, I'll take the fried okra, I'll take the pecan pie, and then you get to the end and you pay for it all. By the time we had gotten to the end, I had already consumed 3 torpedoes. It was a pretty exciting time, and it was also exciting at about 2:30 that morning, and exciting again the next morning at about 7 a.m. So
Yeah.
a lot of excitement from 1050 barbecue. I can't tell people not to go there because it was delicious, but at the same time, circumstantially, we had trouble.
Well, we're promised trouble. We're not ever promised that there won't be trouble.
That's true.
So that's good. I think that's probably what we got on this trip right now. Because
Anything you want to say about the roundup that we had with our Abe's friends when we all pickled and chickened together?
I just would say I appreciate our crew so much because we had a great time despite the fact that a rip-roaring Texas thunderstorm
Yes.
put an abrupt stop to the pickling that was happening, and we ended up being able to kind of flee to the indoors. Give a little talk. You created a pretty cool scorecard where people got to go through 11 different areas of their financial lives and say, do I get a point on this or not?
Yeah.
Because there's 11 points to win a pickleball match. You had
Sure.
that t-shirt that you're wearing right now. Maybe you should stand up and show it for the YouTubers. We might even have a couple of those left over if somebody needs an Abraham's Wallet pickling t-shirt. But
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, it was really fun, and I think it will continue to build on itself. Signs point to future visits to the DFW area.
You put a point on it when you said our people are so great, and every time we meet new groups of our people, we're so pleased and delighted. And I keep finding that when our people introduce us to their friends are also quality people. We've never met, geez, where'd you come up with this dud? If one of our people includes a friend in something, I think you'd like this. I think you'd be interested in this kind of stuff. They're always winners. I also have to throw in, if anybody is still watching and cares about such things, for us, it's significant. We've crossed a first threshold of having a video that had 10,000 views. So that was kind of a moment for us. It's kind of exciting.
Yeah, we talked about Bud Light, and you went viral.
Wow.
I love seeing the comments on that thing because it's clearly the YouTube algorithm. Every few days it seems to pop it back in and just show it to some people who it thinks will like it. They aren't all, I would say, likely striving to run their home and their dough like biblical bosses.
Yeah.
So some of the comments, they're colorful. Thankfully, I don't know if you can see those. Most people, I don't think, look at comments when they're seeing shorts, and that's probably a blessing for all of us.
Hey, if you liked this content, be sure to like it and subscribe and share it with somebody. And remember, no matter how you're doing and leading your family, God's love for you is huge, and His grace is grand.